are men expected to end up having healthy relationships, appreciative relationships with women, when their first introduction to any kind of intimacy with women is via pornography, and they're also told on the internet that they're by nature rapists and pieces of shit? Your parents all sucked at raising you. Let's be honest. People have no reading comprehension. People have no media literacy. People are not taught how to critically think. They're not critical thinking. Most of y'all will struggle to ever find a job that is not making you live paycheck to paycheck. Most of y'all will not have retirements. Most of y'all will not have access to Social Security. Y'all definitely don't have fucking pensions. What is a pension? You don't even know what a pension is. Subscribe! You know what the thing is that I want to talk about? The reason I want to talk about like the politics is because I'm just tired of hearing about the like gender war shit. You know what I give a fuck about? How hard it is to get a job that will actually support you in 2024. How education is like a massive predatory ass lie. Because you're supposed to be able to get a bachelor's degree and be guaranteed a career that would mean that you would be comfortable. And like, that doesn't exist anymore. I care about that. I care about how education has only gotten more expensive and less useful. I care about how for a lot of jobs, for an entry position, you need work experience and a degree, and they want to pay you $15 an hour. Because it used to be like, you could like work a job that was like an entry level-ish position, and you could afford to live with like roommates, right? You couldn't necessarily live by yourself like 10 years ago, but if you had a job, you could probably afford tightly to live with roommates. But then it was supposed to be, you get a degree and you have a salary where you can live on your own. Like that was how it was supposed to work. Except for the fact that education means all. Education is only actually valid and helpful in careers that absolutely require it for like licensure. But the amount of money that you go into debt to get that education is not worth the amount of money you will make in that job that you had to get all that licensure and education for. Like that's what I give a fuck about. I care about how college has only gotten more expensive and is like less useful than it ever has been ever. I care about how, if I could be so bold, because this is maybe a right-winger issue, I care about how the military has taken advantage of people in difficult situations and promised them the world, and then chew them up and spit them out and don't give them any actual support outside of the military. And then we're told that we're not supposed to have empathy toward veterans. I care about how expensive it is to live everywhere now. Because there used to be places where you could go and it was like cheaper to live there. You wouldn't have access to all of the nice things, but it was more affordable to live there. But anywhere that was more affordable to live is now less affordable to live because people moved there and it got more expensive. That's what I care about. I care about how healthcare is so hard to get. And I care about how it is. How expensive it is, and that healthcare companies can just decide to not cover something because they don't feel like it. You can't get rid of your student loans no matter what you do. There's no forgiveness. The forgiveness got canceled, right? The Supreme Court ruled against student loan forgiveness. So now what happens in the US is that you are sold the lie. You are sold the lie that if you go to college and go into an immense amount of debt when you are 18, that you will be comfortable in life. Except for the fact that that's just not true. So you're expected to go tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars into student loan debt to secure your future, and your future is not secured. And you can't get rid of student loan debt. There's nothing you can do. You can declare bankruptcy and your student loan debt will remain. There are very few ways to get your student loans forgiven other than just paying them back. But you know, the second you're out of school, they're accruing interest. So I'm sick of hearing about like, oh, our boys bad? Our girls bitches? I don't, like, honestly, at this point, like, I don't really give a fuck. The actual lived experience of being an American now is suffering. And nobody ever, like, talks about that stuff. Nobody talks about that. And, like, how the education system is absolutely collapsing in the US. And then we're also talking about getting rid of the Department of Education? What are we gonna privatize education in the US? Like, what's the plan? Public school system has already collapsed, especially since 2020. These kids are not being taught anything that they need to know. And it's not like the kids are lazy, right? The fact is that the schools are meant to just push them through the grades. And it doesn't actually matter if they learned anything. There are 7th graders barely being able to read. It has nothing to do with the kids being unmotivated to learn. The school system can't teach them. They also went like 2 years with COVID with like basically no education because those kids weren't learning all. while their parents were at work and they were alone on their computer. Let's be honest. That's the that like that's the that like I think we should be talking about, because like the fact is that kids are being taught based upon testing, on standardized testing. If everything that we need to know is based off of standardized testing, you're not actually teaching kids to think critically. You're not teaching kids at all. You're literally just teaching kids how to memorize the right answer or get to the right answer. That's it. It's not that hard. Standardized testing was not difficult, even when I was a kid. But these kids are not being taught what they need to be like effective adults. Not that we were either. I never went to an effective sex ed class in school. I never got taught effectively sex ed. I never got taught all about taxes. I never got taught any like home economic skills. I never got taught any of that. So it's not like when I was a kid, I felt like I was being adequately prepared to be an adult. But even less so now that the schools are barely teaching them how to read. Kids are getting to 7th grade and barely being able to know where they live. They don't know their addresses. How do you think we're going to get out of difficult situations and prevent like social regression if our kids literally are not taught how to read and write properly? You guys want to talk about the addiction epidemic in the US, by the way? You guys want to talk about the addiction epidemic in the US? It's like rotting especially young men's brains out because you're not supposed to have access to at 12 years old, at 10 years old. Not especially infinite, unending, free, easy to access like you get now. You weren't supposed to be able to see all that. It's not good for your brain. And then we also have the weird ass YouTube channels that do like very, very close to, but not quite, which gets those kids addicted to later on. Like, you want to talk about all that? Like, can we talk about like actual issues? How kids are being like pipelined into addiction that will affect them until they can get help for it, which is unlikely because people don't take addiction seriously. If we can be so for real. What else should we spit about? Like that, this is the that I think actually matters. How do you think men are expected to end up with a healthy relationship toward women? And this is not a very good liberal take, so put your hats on. This is not a good leftist take from me, okay? How are men expected to end up having healthy relationships, appreciative relationships with women, when their first introduction to any kind of intimacy with women is via, and they're also told on the internet that they're by nature in pieces of. How do you expect them not to go down the right-wing pipeline that tells them that they're good? How do you expect them to not go down the incel route, to not go down those pipelines, when they are never given the tools to have an appropriate relationship with sexuality? This is a huge problem, by the way. This is an epidemic that absolutely needs to be studied, in my opinion. And then your parents all sucked at raising you. Let's be honest. Let's be so for real. Most of our parents blew ass at raising us. We got no formal education about sexuality either. Most of your parents probably didn't give you the talk, unless you're probably a little bit of my like older audience. And women are in some ways rightfully raised to be suspicious of men, right? Because a lot of us have been hurt by men and our mothers have been hurt by men. But then there's the additional assumption that men are inherently dangerous, aggressive people, creatures even. So how the do you expect men to not go towards something that empowers them, even if it's in an incredibly toxic and harmful way, go towards something that empowers them, because you're not properly taught like anything, nothing. And then like they're constantly just told that they're weird. That's like the big problem with the left wing. The big problem with the liberals. You don't touch on the issues for men at all. And the way that they even touch on like women's issues is like honestly sometimes like just kind of offensive. I'm gonna be honest, because I was like the whole like, oh well, if you vote for Kamala, you can get by women. I thought we were like not about the objectification and sexualization. Why are we using the concept of sexual relationships as a currency? I thought that was kind of the opposite of the point. How is that helpful? How does that empower anybody? You'll get a cookie if you vote for Kamala. It's not even that I don't understand. Like, I understand the issues with women. I understand the push for opportunities for women. I care very much about women as a woman. I know, crazy. I care very much about other people. But, like, we have to have, like, some, like, self-reflection sometimes. It's frustrating. Because we talk about, like, oh, well, why didn't men vote for Kamala? Why did men vote for Trump? Because they don't make them feel like they're responsible for shit that they weren't alive for. There are very real problems for women specifically that exist in this world. Men, especially men who are white, have no reason to understand those issues because they do not affect them. They are not affected by the issues of women and people of color. Therefore, they have no reason to care. Additionally, we can go on my train of logic here. It would be nice if they did try to understand, correct? If everybody tried to understand everyone else's problems in a way that was respectful and helpful and provided opportunity for discussion and change, that would be good, yes? Empathy is a very good thing. Yeah, the problem with that is if you assume that their ignorance is because they just hate you and they want to enslave you and they're just like their forefathers who were conquerors and enslavers, they're probably not going to want to listen to you. When you make it their problem, like they're doing it to you, they don't want to listen to you. So how do you get people to be empathetic if you are not empathetic to them? How do you plan to do that? How does the left plan to do that? Because it's very clear that white men have a lot of voting power, right? It's very clear that white men have a large amount of voting power, more so than other groups, right? How do we get them to vote for us? Maybe we don't condescend to them about how their ignorance is proof that they're pieces of shit. Because, like, it is just turning them into that thing. You tell somebody that they're racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever enough, and it's not totally true, but you tell them that enough, what do you know what they're going to become? Is they're probably just going to be like, okay, fine, I'll be a racist, sexist, homophobe. Since it's so easy to be the worst person ever, I'll just do that. Is that necessarily the best way to go about it? Obviously not, but that's how people are. And it's just so frustrating. Because, like, do we need to interface on issues where it's obviously based in misogyny? Because I'm not saying that there are not people who are not genuinely misogynistic, who are not genuinely racist, homophobic. If you genuinely try to understand the issues affecting those people, maybe they might want to understand the issues affecting you too. And I don't really know how to do that. Like, I'm not like a policymaker. I'm not trying to get somebody to vote for me. I'm not like, I don't have the like systemic power or the money or the ability to do that. But like, if you try to understand the issues affecting men in a genuine way and help fix them, perhaps instead of what we do typically on the left is point at men and go, this is all your fault. This is your fault. You did this. You specifically, random white man, you did this. Instead of that, if we just try to sit down and maybe like understand what happened, like what the system that affect them currently in 2024, maybe they might be more interested in understanding our issues rather than what happens is, and this is something I've also talked about with people. I've heard this sentiment before, where men, in order to be allies to women and people of color, in order to be proper like liberals, Democrats, whatever, they have to do a sort of dialogue about like, okay, yeah, a lot of men have done things, but I can't take it personally when everybody says that men are awful people because it's not about me. That is a lot to ask someone to do. That is a lot to ask someone to do, to like sit down and not center themselves and not take something personally that does seem very personal and sometimes is very personal, and like actually have that like, okay, it's like not about me thing. Because you're asking people to do something that is sort of outside of their own best interest. You're asking men to kill their ego and accept that they will almost always have a finger pointed at them in situations if they don't have the right opinion. And like, you're asking a lot. You are, genuinely. Just like it feels like it's a lot for a lot of like, you know, like woke liberal people to not center their experiences and everything all the time as well. You're asking people to take something that is almost always worded as a direct attack on them and who they are and everything they've grown up to be, and not take it offensively. And like, you're asking that also of people realistically, if we can get real about it, that are typically, most of us are not raised with good like emotional skills. We're not raised to have high EQ. Most people are not given the tools to be able to think critically about themselves. Most people are raised like most people are raised by asshole parents that shouldn't have been parents. I'm just gonna be real. At least in my experience, most of the people that I know were not raised with any amount of good emotional coping mechanisms, any good skills, any way to have like good emotional intelligence. People don't have good emotional intelligence. So you are asking people to with very low emotional intelligence, very low coping skills, very low critical thinking skills, especially about themselves, because that is inherently painful to be critical of yourself, to put all of that to the side and be more mature about the situation, or else they're just part of the problem automatically. I think it says a lot about society that it is more common for people to be raised in bad environments than good ones. Yeah. It depends on your upbringing and changes person to person. Yes. There are people I've met who have been raised very much to understand the women and appreciate women. And there are people who have been raised very much to not do that. It's very hard to unlearn things. And you're asking people to want to do that while also being told that they are the problem and that they are sort of naturally and inherently dangerous. I ended up being emotionally intelligent because I was a writer. I wrote a lot as a kid, and it helped me process my emotions, and it made me a lot more emotionally intelligent than I would have been without it. But people are not raised to be resilient and think about themselves honestly. What people are raised to do is rip themselves apart, though. I'll say, something that I've come to understand as a content creator is, one of the biggest barriers to higher levels of success for a lot of content creators is being able to look at yourself critically. And what I mean is not to on yourself and find every flaw and rip yourself up apart. What I mean is to think critically so that you can get better, because that's the only way you can get better. That's one of the biggest differences between content creators that end up succeeding and content creators that never quite take off, is because when you cannot look at yourself critically and then find ways to improve and not on yourself, you're just not going to get better because you're just going to be too busy on yourself. But most people are not effectively taught how to look at themselves honestly, see yourself critically, and want to get better from that and not just shit on yourself. Because that's something I had to deal with, If I posted something and it didn't do well, I had two options. I could try and figure out why that thing didn't do well. I could look at the title, the thumbnail, I can look at the video, the content of it, my tags, and I could try and figure out what did not make it as successful as I would have wanted it to be. Or I could do what a lot of people do. A lot of people are taught very effectively by their parents, who shit talk them all the time, to do, which is to go, okay, so I'm like a giant piece of shit. Nobody likes me. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to succeed. I suck because of this and this and this. My voice is annoying. I don't like myself. And then but you're not going to get better. You're not going to get better when you tell yourself that everybody hates you and you fell off and you're never going to be good enough. You can get better if you find things that are actionable so that you can learn from it. People are not don't get taught how to do that. People are not taught how to do that. And I see it so often with content creators, so that's why I'm saying it in that context. But in life, in general, people are not taught how to do that. They're not taught how to look at themselves critically and get better from that critical feedback that they give themselves or from other people. And people are also not taught how to give effective critical feedback to others. That's what's so f***ed up about it. Because you're also we're not taught how to effectively give feedback to other people either. Because again, what we saw, a lot of us, not all of us, I'm sure some of y'all had lovely parents who were nice to you. My mom didn't hug me enough. I was one of those. Okay. So many of us, our main way of seeing how people evaluated themselves was our parents on themselves, on each other, and on us. So we don't know how to give effective feedback. We don't know how to give ourselves effective feedback or other people effective feedback. So how the fuck does anybody get better? That's what's bothering me is we're talking about these social issues in the most sensationalist, easy way to talk about things. And the thing is so when are we going to talk about education and how it's failing us? When are we going to talk about our parents and how they failed us? How generationally our parents failed us in different special ways per generation, depending on when your parents were born? When are we going to talk about how Generation X is the generation with the most lead in their blood? Because we all thought it was boomers that had the lead paint stare. Oh, no. Well, most of our parents have the most lead in their blood known to man, which causes a lot of emotional instability and a hard time thinking. When are we going to talk about how therapy is kind of it's really hard to get therapy. It's really hard to afford it. A lot of people's insurance doesn't cover it. But in general, the actual system of therapy is not very effective because people get into therapy because they think it's going to fix themselves and end up f***ing up other people. People have no reading comprehension. People have no media literacy. People are not taught how to critically think. They're not critical thinking. College is overrun by people doing AI essays, so they're not even learning how to critical think later in college. I feel like I'm losing it. The education system has already collapsed. Teachers are not treated well, not paid enough. And then we're gonna disband the Department of Education. I feel like I've lost my mind. We're told to talk about so many issues that really, like, how many of y'all are affected by illegal immigration? Let's be honest. How many of y'all, put a 1 in chat if you've personally in your real life been affected by illegal immigration ever. Put a 2 in chat if you've never been affected by that once as an American person. I don't care. Like, it's not that I don't care. These are not issues that personally affect me. There are issues that do personally affect me, and I'd love to talk about those. We never talk about those people. We never talk about those things, I mean. We never talk about shit that actually are on a daily basis affecting most Americans in a way that are making society, like, unbearable to live in. That's the that is getting me. Is like, to be honest, like, do I care about illegal immigrants? Yes, insofar as I think that human beings should be treated like human beings. Do I understand enough about immigration policy to talk about it in any big way? No. It also doesn't affect me. The things that affect me are these, like, microcosm issues that are not being fixed. They're not being talked about. And so I'm tired of hearing about it. There are things that are actually, like, rotting society from the core. And we're talking about, like, illegal immigration. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about these things. How many of y'all, if y'all have been depressed, tell me if this is relatable to you. You were told that you were depressed because something was wrong with your brain. But if you went back and looked at it, you had a lot of sad shit happen in your life, a lot of up shit happen in your life, and now you're sad. That doesn't sound like something's wrong with your brain. It sounds like you're a person who had up shit happen to them, and now they're sad. There are very few people who are just sad for no reason. Therapy is vastly more effective than SSRIs, but if they won't tell you to go to therapy, they'll give you a pill. That doesn't work that well. Like, the medicalization of mental health is insane, when the reality is like, if you have sad things happen to you, you will be sad. If you have parents that are not nice to you and invalidate you, you will not like yourself. Those are, like, there's a cause and effect there. That's not a medical issue. That's like, this is what I mean, though. It's like, I'm sick of hearing about the gender war dog when there are vastly more important problems that will never be talked about. How many of y'all who have taken, like, medication for your depression have felt like it significantly helped you? Put a 1 in chat. Like, that you were no longer depressed and you felt that your core issue was fixed. Put a 1 in chat if you think it helped. Put a 2 in chat if you were still sad to some extent, or to a very large extent. Because I can tell you, I was pumped full of medications when I first started getting treatment for my... I was giving a bunch of diagnoses. You know what it was? This is me being vulnerable here. I don't usually talk about this. It was because I had PTSD. And you know what happened once we treated the PTSD? Is I was happier. And I didn't hate myself so much. And my life was better. And I didn't need all of those medications. But they would have kept prescribing me those medications forever. It can help, right? It can help take the veil up a little bit so you can actually work on shit. But SSRIs are not a cure to your depression. The cure to your depression is fixing your life. That's the thing that pisses me off, is like, it can help. Some people do have things that absolutely do need to be medicated. People who have bipolar disorder need to be medicated. Most people with schizophrenia will need to be medicated. Like, there are conditions that are quite literally genetic that absolutely, like, do need to be medicated so that people can live a more normal life. But yeah, no, we should talk about those things. How most of us are, like, severely, like, are pretty well traumatized, not given tools in order to function in the adult world, not given tools on how to communicate, not given tools about how to emotionally regulate, not given tools about how to do anything, like, in terms of even practical. And then we're not able to get those tools effectively as adults either because they're too expensive. Do you think that might have an effect on why a lot of people are, like, really angry and, like, up? Why they seem kind of unhinged a lot on social media, hypothetically? Is that, like, people are quite literally not given the tools to function. Your parents don't do a good job of that because your parents weren't given those either. That's the shit that pissed, like, that, like, I'm so sick of hearing about the gender war shit. How are you supposed to preach empathy when people are not even taught how to empathize with themselves, much less other people? The dishonesty of pretending like the left is the empathetic side and the right is the unempathetic side is insane. None of us are empathetic. None of y'all are empathetic. Y'all, like, on the left, they will use any excuse to find a reason to not empathize with other people on these issues. It used to be that part of the struggle for feminist issues, for people of color, was the desire to achieve the American dream. Because they did not have the same access to the American dream that people who were richer, whiter, whatever, had access to. That was part of that struggle. No one has access to the American dream anymore. Most of the white men I know still live with their parents. The only people who have access to wealth are people who are already wealthy 99% of the time, and they hold so much of the wealth. So like, if there's not any effort to like holding hands and like doing it together, and you just want to point at white people, like nobody has access to those things in the same way anymore. Nobody does. Everybody's education is for everybody, unless you are super wealthy. Like, that's the thing that gets me. Most of us in this chat will never own a home. Most of us will never own a home. I'm more likely to own a home because we have help from the military, be honest. But like, most of y'all will never own a home. Most of y'all will struggle to ever find a job that is not making you live paycheck to paycheck. Most of y'all will not have retirements. Most of y'all will not have access to Social Security. Y'all definitely don't have pensions. And that doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, black, white, Hispanic, doesn't matter. None of that. You have access to none of that. For the vast majority of you, none of you will have access to those things. What is a pension? You know what's crazy? Is you don't even know what a pension is. And that used to be the whole point. That was the basis of the American dream, was pensions. This is the thing about the American dream, that this is like a huge indicator of why like that American dream, like white picket fence, it doesn't exist anymore, okay? A pension was something that you would get from your employer. A pension is a retirement arrangement in which your employer promises you a regular payment from the day you retire for as long as you live. It depends usually on how long you worked for an employer and your salary with that employer. This was in most jobs. This was the point. This was why you got your education, you got your bachelor's degree, you picked a job, and you stayed at your 9 to 5 until you were 65, and then you retired, because you would get a pension. That was the basis of how that worked, because you would get a pension if you stayed long enough and you got your education and you kept your head down and you worked hard. You would be able to retire. You would also get enough money to afford being alive. They don't give you pensions anymore. They don't give you pensions anymore. So few jobs give you a pension that it's actually like the fact is that a lot of you don't even know what that is. The fact I didn't know this existed is wild. That was the basis of how how it worked. They don't give you pensions anymore, to the point where y'all don't even know what that is. Sometimes the pension isn't even enough, but it was still better than what we have now, which is nothing. We have no guarantee. Why is anyone interested in trying when, like, ultimately the vast majority of us, the vast majority of y'all, I'm a content creator, so hopefully I eventually make enough money that I don't have to deal with that. That's my goal, is to make enough money that I don't have to deal with these problems. But the vast majority of people who are younger, who are growing into adulthood, even if you have an education, it will be very likely for you to ever not live this life, and I'll paint it for you. You will struggle to ever find a job that pays you enough money. You will probably live paycheck to paycheck forever. It doesn't matter if you got an education or not, unless you got a very specific education and you also got very specific internships and you got lucky, because paying for education is expensive, and then you'll be in student loan debt. So even if you got an education, you are most likely to still live paycheck to paycheck. You are most likely to still need roommates to live, and you will still have tight funds. You will never own a home. You will most likely never own like a nice car. You can maybe own a beater, right? You will you will never be comfortable. You will not retire. You will not certainly have retirement funds unless you work very, very hard. The vast majority of you, that is the system in which you will live. Your health insurance will always suck. Your student loans will loom over you forever if you got an education. And everything is way too expensive for the amount that you can make. You'll probably live with your parents for a super long time. Most people that I know live with their parents at my age. And I'll say it's an age that's too old to be living with your parents, let's be honest. Most of you will never retire. The whole point of me being a content creator is someday I'd like to retire. That's what I want. I want to be able to retire comfortably and go off and travel or whatever. Or just dick around. But yeah, no. Most of y'all don't move out at 18. Most people don't move out at 18 anymore. They stay way longer with their parents because they quite literally can't afford anything. Healthcare will always be a struggle. Social Security's cooked. But yeah, that's the world that y'all get to look forward to.